Hi there everybody, I'm Alexander Shelley, Music Director of Canada's National Arts Centre Orchestra, and this is the second in a series of videos about the techniques of conducting, and it's the first of the videos where I'm going to talk about our foundation, our basis, which is the right hand. The technique of this hand gives the tempo, it gives entries, it gives phrasing, it gives dynamic, and we're going to start off looking at how it all breaks down, the very foundations of right hand stick technique. First of all, we're going to have a conversation about this here, which is a baton. Those of you who saw the first video will remember me talking about a poor man called Jean-Baptiste Lully, who was one of the first conductors when they used to use staves. He stabbed himself in the foot with a big staff, and it became gangrenous and he died. That evolved into this, which is far less dangerous, although one still needs to be careful with it. But it's often a question that I get asked as a conductor, and most conductors get asked, what is the point of the baton? Well, first, I would like to say this. There are many, many fine conductors who work without a baton, using solely their hands. And there are many techniques that can be developed that make the hands a very useful tool. And indeed, many of the most fundamental parts of conducting technique can work either with a hand or with a baton. When we use the baton, however, which is what I'll be doing throughout all of these videos, we need to understand that on the one hand, it's an extension of the gestures that we make with our arm, and is also a tool in itself that we can use from the fingers to be expressive. But first and foremost, it's a focal point for musicians right here at the tip of the baton to understand the color, the dynamic, the tempo, the expression of what it is that you're trying to indicate. And if we use it correctly, the baton offers us an almost unending palette of different ways to express ourselves as conductors. Right, let's start off with the basics. As a conductor, it's important to be poised, simply have a straight posture and a neutral posture when you're standing on the podium or on the floor in front of an orchestra. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Make sure that you feel centered and balanced so that if you move your upper body, you're not going to fall over. Sounds simple, but it's an important place to start. Now I'd like you to imagine that you have two boxes in front of you. There's a line, an axis down the middle of your body, and to the left-hand side here, there's a box. To the right-hand side here, there's another box. Now, very simply, we're going to divide in the next few videos this box into everything you do with your right hand, and this box into everything you do with your left hand. And for the first few videos, we're going to exclude the left hand. This is a very important tool for a conductor, but we need to start with the most important tool here in the right hand. So for the rest of this video, we're going to be using this space here. When you take a baton, imagine putting your arm out like a ballet dancer. So we have three key points. You have the shoulder, you have the elbow, and you have the wrist. For the moment in our work, I'm going to ask you to imagine putting a coin on the piece of flesh between your first finger and your thumb. And imagine that that coin can be balanced. You take the baton and you put it in between your first and second fingers, so ultimately you're creating a curve from the shoulder round through to the tip of the baton. That will be a neutral position for us. Now, for many of you that may feel slightly uncomfortable to start with. Find a position in your hand, forgetting about the shoulder and the elbow for a moment, find a position in your hand where the cork or the wood rests comfortably between your fingers. And also recognize that, as with many things in life, to begin with it may feel slightly strange, but practice will make it feel more comfortable. Also, throughout the videos, I'm going to talk to you about how we may vary this and allow a beat to become more personal, also to your own physiology. Everybody is built differently, everybody will find certain things more comfortable. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to keep it simple and talk about this basic technique. So, we have the arc here. There's three moving points, as I mentioned. We have the shoulder, which allows us to do this, which allows us to move out to the side, to the left, and to the right. We have the elbow, which will allow us to do this, and we have the wrist, which will allow us to do this. And again, over the course of the videos, I'm going to talk to you about how to indicate various elements to an orchestra using each of these devices. For today, we're just going to talk about the shoulder, and I'm going to show you some exercises that you can do to practice the very foundations of all technique. We're going to start with the idea of beating a simple 1. Within your box on the right-hand side of your body, I'd like you to imagine two planes, a plane here and a plane up here. Our aim in a beat of 1 is that we will go from the bottom plane to the top plane and back down again, smoothly, evenly, so that if you are subdividing the motion in your mind, it would be completely even at all points. I'll talk more about what I mean about that in a moment. But for the moment, we have a plane here, and we have a plane here. When we beat 1, we move in a straight line between the bottom plane to the top plane and back down again. And for the moment, this movement should please come from your shoulder. 1, 1, 1. I'm just hinging from the shoulder. I'm trying to keep the position of the arm stable. I'm not using my elbow. I'm not using my wrist. That would look like this. You start to lose a little bit of the control. When I talked about subdivisions a moment ago, what I meant was if you take a beat of 1, 1, and you imagine eighth notes, you could say 1 and, 1 and, 1 and. If you imagine sixteenths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're subdividing in eighths, the half of the beat, so the first eighth note, would be at the top plane, and then the second eighth, so the end of the beat, would be the bottom plane. 1 and 1. But you won't stop. 1 and 1 and. If you're subdividing in sixteenths, the first sixteenth will be in the middle of that movement, the second sixteenth is at the top, the third is in the middle, and the final 16th is at the bottom again. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and so on and so forth. So what we're practicing here is having real control through the beat. I'm going to subdivide for you in sixteenths and speed up and slow down and show you what I mean if you watch my baton. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2. So you see, as I slow down the sixteenths, the movement slows down in exactly the same relationship. So whether fast or slow, out of the corner of an eye for a musician in the orchestra, they can tell exactly where I am in the beat. Now, one of the ways that we achieve that is by having clear planes in our mind. Bottom plane, top plane, bottom plane, top plane, bottom plane, top plane. In later videos, I'm going to talk more about how to indicate dynamics. But already here, I'd like you to get used to the idea that the higher the upper plane is, the louder the dynamic you're going to be indicating. The lower the upper plane, the softer the dynamic. Let me give an example. Forte could look like this, and 1, 1, 1. If I move the upper plane down right to the bottom, it'll look like it's soft. 1. And that's simply the amplitude of the beat. So just remember that when we get into later videos. The one beat is fundamental to all the other beats that we're going to talk about in this video. Why? Well, because that clear and controlled movement up and down will always be an indicator for musicians that the last beat of the bar is happening. Let me explain what I mean. In 4/4, we have this pattern, 2, 3, 4. In 3/4, we have 1, 2, 3. In 2/4, we have 1, 2. In all the other beating patterns, that final beat is up and down. So the more consciously you're able to control this movement, and the better you're able to control it, the more clearly you'll be able to control the end of every bar. Now remember that that one beat will be the last beat of every other pattern we look at. So, how do you beat 2? How do you beat 3? How do you beat 4? Let's just talk about the simple coordinates. Within our box here, we're going to imagine an axis down the middle that divides it. That will be R1. Over here, we have another point. Over here, we have another point. In 2, which is the next pattern we're going to look at, we go 1, 2, 1, 2. So we're always returning to this central axis, and the speed of the baton is identical between the movement upwards and the movement sideways. 1, 2, 1, 2. You'll notice in the 2 beat that both the first and the second beat occur at exactly the same point on these axes. What differentiates between the first and second beat is the movement either up or sideways. So the first beat always goes clearly to the side, the second beat always goes clearly up and down. Remember, the second beat is the last beat of the bar, and that's that one movement that we practice. So 1 to the side, 2 back, 1 to the side, 2 back. Now, Later we'll talk about how to have even more clarity in these beats using the wrist and the arm. I just point out to you now that even though this is the basis of the movement, when it comes to needing to be extra clear about what's happening, perhaps for musicians who are sitting in this plane here, you can drop the baton and lift from that point. If that's the notional axis point, you can do a little U underneath to go up to this point on 2. Anyway, we'll talk about that more later. Our basis is 1, 2, 1, 2. When we're talking about a 3 pattern, the points are exactly the same. Let me show you what it looks like. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now what you'll immediately notice is that actually the movement is the same as a 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, except that this journey from points A to B is half the speed. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I'll go back to 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's look at the pattern for 4. We add a new point. It's the one over here. And we're going to move 1 to the left, 2, then all the way over to the third point, 3, and then back up again, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, you'll notice for the 3 pattern and the 4 pattern, there's this clear up and down gesture on the final beat. So to recap, we have 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then in 4, 2, 3, 4. What I'd ask you to do before you watch the next video is to try and mimic some of these patterns that I'm indicating to you, to notice that I'm keeping the speed of the baton between the points very consistent. That of course means that if you're doing the 2, 1, 2, that movement back and forth is double the speed in one beat to when you're in 3. So in 2 it's 1 and, in 3 it's 1, 2, 3. Elements like that is very important to control at this stage where we're practicing the beat. If you want to be really nerdy about it, you can also get a metronome and put it on. And place the beat with the metronome. Another thing that you can do, which is a very useful exercise, is to have a tabletop near you and to go down to the tabletop with the stick and to really practice feeling smoothly across the tabletop this motion. 2, 3, up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And for those of you that are extremely nerdy, you can do both at once. You can put a metronome on the table and then use the table as this plane so that your body gets used to balancing that out. Our aim at the end of all of these videos and all the work we're going to do on conducting technique is that you do internalize it, because first and foremost, when it gets to the first rehearsal, a conductor needs to be freed of anything to do with themselves and needs to be listening to what's happening in the orchestra. So anyway, I hope you have fun practicing these basics of the right hand stick technique, and in the next video we'll talk about the next steps.